Good morning. Welcome to Thursday. We are here partway through the week. So far, we've had some fantastic discussions. I've been part of them. I'm sure you've all been part of other fantastic discussions. I wanted to say a special thank you to our sponsors. They have made sure that we are well provided for this week. They have been supporting our coffee and our abundant snacks and our nice lunches and reusable lanyards and all of the things that help us work together better. We're also really grateful for those sponsors who show up outside the meeting. We're seeing an increasing, groundswell of interest from sponsors who want to give us compute credits and support hackathons and support early career researchers. And if that fits someone's brand, we are happy to talk to you about that. Sponsorship does not have to stay just in the summer meeting, the July meeting, because our Australian colleagues are having winter. So recall that ESIP is guided by our community participation guidelines. I talked about this on Tuesday, but these guidelines really shape how we interact in person and online. And upholding these guidelines is a really important part of being active within ESIP. There's a reporting form online that's linked to the community participation guidelines. So if you ever experience treatment that is unacceptable, please use the reporting form or come find a staff member or come find me or send any of us a direct email or a Slack message because we really want to follow up and make sure that unacceptable behaviors are stopped. Today, we will be having two speakers during our plenary session. First, we will hear from Fa Li, who is an assistant professor at UT Austin in the Jackson School of Geosciences. And second, we will hear from Maddie Berger, who is a PhD student at University of Hawaii and ESIP's Raskin Scholar. So first, I'll introduce Dr. Li. Dr. Li investigates how terrestrial ecosystems interact with human activities and hydroclimatic hazards, and he particularly focuses on wildfires and land-atmosphere interactions of carbon, water, and energy. Let's hear it for carbon. Love that stuff. His research aims to better monitor and predict and reduce hydroclimatic risks to people and ecosystems by leveraging advances in AI. Earth observations, and Earth system models. So Fa's lab, the Land Intelligence Lab, has research focuses on wildfire risk and hydroclimatology, terrestrial ecosystems and wetland processes, and methane fluxes. I will show you the Slido link for the Q&A. Go ahead and snap a photo of that so you can be adding photos at any time, or adding questions to the queue at any time. And then once Fab finishes his presentation, I'll walk through some of those questions. Come on up, Fab. Let's get your presentation loaded.
Thank you, Sarah, for the nice introduction. And thank you for inviting me here. It's my first time to attend ESIP workshop, and I'm very excited and honored to be here. This year's theme is bridging divides, and I want to share some thoughts about trustworthy AI for Earth system science, from accuracy to interpretability and causality. AI has been widely used in computer science. For example, that figure shows the image classification, for the super resolution, the video prediction, and also natural language processing, large language models, agentic AI. And this AI model in computer science has now been increasingly used in Earth system science. For example, the Earth foundation models, weather forecasts, embedding and downscaling these tasks. And different from the black box AI model in computer science, AI model in Earth system science can be integrated together with process-based Earth system models to solve some Earth system science problem. For example, the right figure shows how AI model integrates together with process model. We call it hybrid AI or physics-informed AI or knowledge-guided AI, and sometimes we use as a surrogate or emulator. Here, for example, AI can be used to optimize the parameters in Earth system models. All AI model can be used to replace a process model to better fit the ground truth or observations. Um, in these applications, it's not surprising that AI models can be more accurate than process models, right? But the problem is for some high-stake decisions, accuracy is not enough. We hope the model can be more trustworthy. For example, we hope the AI model can be more robust across different environmental gradients, land cover types, space, and over time. And also, we hope the model can be transparent, interpretable. If possible, it's causality-driven rather than correlation-based. And also, we hope to understand the data itself, the uncertainty of the data set, how to process the data set, and how the data uncertainty propagates to the model outputs and affects our decisions. And also, there are other dimensions or metrics to quantify the trustworthy AI. Given the limited time, today I mainly focus on interpretability and causality. And there have been studies published to explore trustworthy AI. For example, the red figure shows a paper published in Science making machine learning trustworthy. And also be aware of explanations from AI. Stop explaining black box machine learning models for some high-stake decisions. Instead, use some interpretable AI models and also advances and challenges in trustworthy AI. Although these studies have been published, trustworthy AI in Earth system science remain understudied. As I mentioned, for example, the interpretability and causality, how to quantify interpretability for Earth system processes, how to use causality to get the AI model in Earth system modeling. These questions are important, especially for some high-stake decisions. For example, here, the hazard prediction, the disaster warning and mitigation, and also for some critical Earth processes, for example, red figure, the critical feedback between climate and the ecosystems. That feedback can affect the future of Earth's climate. For these processes, I will give some examples of why we need trustworthy AI and why trustworthy AI is important. As I mentioned, there are many metrics to quantify the trustworthy AI, and here I focus on interpretability and causality. The first piece is the black box. We know that many AI models are black boxes. For these black boxes, it is really concern for us when we use this black box AI model. How can we trust these AI models? Because we know that models can be right for wrong reasons, which means that the model can have a high accuracy. But when we check the model structure can be biased sometimes. And if the model structure violates the physical principle, it's really hard to trust these AI models. So we need some model beyond the black box, like interpretable AI. And here I give an example of why interpretable AI is important. The example is wildfire modeling, fire risk warning. In US, over 90% of the management decisions from the federal or state fire agency were supported by the US National Fire Danger Rating System. And the output of the system is a fire danger value, and a larger value means higher fire risk. For example, the left figure, we can see the fire risk in region B is lower than the fire risk in region A. And based on this risk distribution, the agencies or private landowners or company can make their decision whether or how to reduce the fire risk. So this fire risk warning is important. The problem is whether this system can reliably capture the actual fire risk. This is the year 2020, and it's extreme fire year in California history. In that year, 4 extreme wildfires occurred in region B. However, the system show the fair risk in region B is lower. And there is no extreme welfare in region A, but systems show fair risk in region A is much higher. And in that year, in region B, there are over 3,000 homes burned, and many people died, and many people suffer from the asthma issue because of the welfare smoke. And billions of economic losses were caused by the welfares. On the other side, if we have a reliable model that can tell us where the fair risk is higher in advance, then fair mitigation maybe can be implemented to reduce the fair risk and reduce the negative impact of welfares. So many AI models have been developed to try to improve the fair risk warning accuracy. However, here I give an example to show that accuracy is not enough. Here are two models, two machine learning models. They have a comparable accuracy. We can see, however, if we use explainable AI, some technique to open the black box of the AI models and check their internal structure, their modeled relationship between fair risk and its drivers, we can see different responses. The left model show a positive response, which means increasing temperature will increase the large fair risk. And the right model show a nonlinear response. And even under high temperature conditions, increasing in temperature can reduce fair risk, which does not make sense. So accuracy is not enough if the model structure itself violates our physical principle. How can we trust these AI models? So to solve this problem, we developed the physically interpretable AI fair warning system. Different from the purely black box AI model, we integrate some fair principles into the model structure. For example, here, the model explicitly considers the control from fuel availability, fuel flammability, and human suppression efforts. For example, when the fuel availability increase, fire can more easily spread, and the fire risk could be higher. And for fuel flammability, if the fuel is drier, the fire can more easily spread, and fire risk can be higher. And here we also consider other factors, land cover, topography, wind speed, these factors. And we use attention mechanism. That's a technique used in many large language models, also transformer, to represent the dependency between fire risk and its drivers. And we name this fire model as attention fire, not only because the attention mechanism uses the technical side, but also we hope people can pay attention to fire risk. And the model is driven by observations using satellite observed vegetation dynamics to drive the model, and use satellite observed fires to train and validate the model. And the model can predict fire risk 1 month in advance, so that we can know the fire risk, have time to decide whether fire mitigation is needed or not. And also the resolution is 1 kilometer, so that we know where fire risk is higher and where fire risk is lower. Then we compared the interpretable AI with other fire models, both black box AI and the process-based fire models. On this figure, the x-axis represents the physical interpretability. And the higher physical interpretability means a larger of modeled relationship is consistent with our fair physical principle. And the y-axis is accuracy. We can see the 4 models in the oval represent the black box AI models, and 3 models in the rectangle represent the process-based models. We can see there is a trade-off. For the process-based models, it's more interpretable, but it's less accurate. For the black box AI models, it's more accurate, but less interpretable. And after using some fair physical principles, the interpretable AI, the RESTAR, narrow this trade-off. Its accuracy is about 20 to 40% higher than process-based models, and its interpretability is almost doubled than black box AI models. So fair principles of physics is really important for constraining its AI models. We then overlaid the model output with the satellite observed welfares. This is the output from different models. Different columns represent the model output, and different rows represent different models. And deeper red color means there are more welfare observed by satellites. For example, the interpretable AI model is in the red box. It shows that when the model predicts the fire risk is larger, there are more welfare observed by satellites, which makes sense for the end users. Say the end users see a larger output value from the model, then it means there is a higher actual fire risk, consistent with satellite observations. But it doesn't make sense for some other AI model. For example, the XGBoost, when the model output is higher, which means the model say this area, the fire risk is much larger, but there are fewer satellite observed fires there. That will confuse the end users. So with this interpretable and accurate AI model, what can we do? Let's come back to the extreme fire year in 2020, the real world cases. In that year, again, U.S. National Fire Danger Rating System show the fire risk in region B is lower, but for extreme welfare there. And in region A, the fire risk is higher, but no extreme welfare occurs there. Using our model, we can see here, actually the fire risk in region A is very high. In region B is very high. It's anomaly higher than the other regions. And our model shows that fire risk in region A is much lower because of very limited fuel availability. The spatial sparse vegetation is not easy for the fire to spread, so the fire risk could be lower. So through this example, here are some key takeaways. First is the trade-off. There is a clear trade-off between process-based models and AI models. The process-based model more interpretable, but less accurate. And the black box AI models more accurate, but less interpretable. And when we use, there are some techniques like XAI or explainable AI, like Shapley value. We can, of course, open the black box of the AI models and check their model structures, try to interpret the model itself. But the XAI cannot revise the model structure itself and cannot improve the model physical interpretability. So we recommend using the interpretable AI instead. So try to integrate the knowledge or principles with the process, with the AI model together to improve the model structure itself, rather than just open the black box and check their model structure. And the interpretable AI can be accurate and of course more interpretable. So the key takeaway is stop explaining black box AI model, instead use interpretable AI model structures. So interpretable AI is important. If we have prior knowledge, we can integrate the prior knowledge with AI models. But for algorithm science, for some processes, they are really complicated. We are even not sure about the processes. For this kind of processes, how to improve the model interpretability. Here I introduce causality. That is beyond the correlation and can help us identify causal links from the data set that we are interested and use these causal links to constrain the models. Again, I here give an example to show why causality is important and how to use causality to constrain the models. This is a very classical problem, but remains challenging. That is how teleconnections affect the local precipitation. Here, California precipitation as an example. We are curious about whether California precipitation will become more or less in the future. If we use process-based Earth system models, we can find that different Earth system models have different results, and future change is very uncertain, and some models may have opposing signs of the changes. And so if we use data-driven correlation-based methods, we may find many of these numbered regions are associated with California precipitation changes through teleconnection. And we are not sure about the causal interactions among different regions, how they causally control California precipitation changes. And we cannot remove the confounding impacts. Say one region affects California, but we cannot remove the confounding impacts from other regions. However, using causality, we can identify the directional causal controls from different regions on California precipitation changes. And so what's causality? Causality means change in one variable will cause changes in another variable. And it can help us identify direct and indirect control. For example, here, Northern California precipitation is directly controlled by the sea level pressure or sea surface temperature in region 22, and indirectly controlled by the other three regions, number 1, 11, and 18. And so through this causal inference, we can identify how different regions direct and indirect control the local precipitation changes after removing the confounding impacts. This causal link is powerful because it has time lags. It's time lag control, which means this control can provide prior information for weather forecast. For example, here the time lag range from 1 week to 4 weeks. So it's powerful for weather forecast if we use some data-driven models and integrate these time lag causal links. In addition to these causal links, the time lag causal control, we also found that these causal links or causal networks help us constrain Earth system models. Here, each point represents an Earth system model from CMIP 6. And the left figure represents Northern California, and the right figure represents Central and South California. And we can see the x-axis represents the bias measured by MAE, the precipitation bias, and the y-axis represents the similarity between observed and modeled causal network. We can see that model with higher similarity tend to have a lower bias, which means if an Earth system model can better represent the causal teleconnection controls, the model tends to better represent the precipitation. So using this kind of causal network, it can help us to constrain the Earth system models. Here is another example. It can help us to constrain the future projection from Earth system models. These two figures represent future precipitation changes in northern and central and southern California. The left figure is Northern California, and the blue box represents the original Earth system models. It shows that the future precipitation in North California will increase, but the uncertainty range is very large. And in the right figure, it shows the Central South California. We can see some models show the precipitation will increase, some models show will decrease, and also the uncertainty range is very large. After using the causal network constraints, the optimal Earth system model shown by the orange boxes, it showed the uncertainty range is substantially reduced. The uncertainty range for example, in the North California reduced by 47%, and in Central South California reduced by about 70%. And also for the right figure, we can see the optimal model consistently show that the precipitation will likely increase compared to the original Earth system models. So this causal network is powerful or potentially useful for us to understand the causal control in Earth model and help us reduce the uncertainty for future projection. And also, through this causal network, it can help us to understand why and how this uncertainty is reduced. For example, here, we can see the North California precipitation is directly controlled by region 22 and indirectly controlled by the other three regions. And again, here, each point represents an Earth system model. So reducing uncertainty in the three indirect regions will reduce the uncertainty in node 22 and further reduce the uncertainty in the local precipitation in North California. So this causal network also help us understand how different components or different regions interact in the Earth system models and how their uncertainty propagates and how the uncertainty can be reduced. So what's the main takeaway for this part? This part I introduced the causality. That's for some processes, very complicated. We are not sure about the processes. It's hard to use the prior knowledge to constrain the models. So we can use some data-driven causality-based method to discover the knowledge from the data sets after removing the confounding impacts. The causality can help us identify direct and indirect controls and help us understand how different components in the Earth system or in the studied system propagate and interact with each other. That's very powerful for us to understand for some very complicated processes. That's for causality and Earth system models. The final part I want to share is it's called causality guided AI. How to integrate causality with AI model together to help us improve process understanding and help us to improve the model interpretability. We call it causality guided AI. Also, I will introduce this causality guided AI through an example. That's also a very classical problem in the Earth system science, the scaling problem. We often meet a problem that we want to scale some finding or process from site level to regional and global scales. For example, here, each point represents an eddy covariant tower, and the tower measures the land and field interactions of carbon, water, and energy fluxes. And we hope to use some AI models to first represent these processes and learn these processes at site level. Then we want to use some remote sensing or reanalysis data set to scale this site level knowledge of processes across space and over time, like regionally and globally, so that we can understand the regional patterns and global patterns. For example, how methane changes over time, regionally and globally. For this problem, the interpretable AI or AI model structure is very important. Here I give an example. Many traditional black box AI models have been used for this scaling issue, and it's not surprising that this AI model can achieve a higher accuracy than process-based models. However, we know that these AI models are correlation-based, and usually we do not provide prior knowledge for the AI model to constrain the model structure. So sometimes, especially when the training data set is limited or underrepresented, the AI model can miscapture the dominant driver or capture some wrong relationships. As a result, when we use this AI model for scaling from sites to regional and global scale, this structure bias can propagate and finally cause large uncertainty in the regional and global products. For example, the figure here, show that the model can perform reasonably well in the training data set. However, when we use AI models to extrapolate over time, we can see substantial uncertainties. One of the reasons is that different models may represent different responses to the environmental changes, although they have comparable accuracy. For example, here, an example. Here are two machine learning models, and the x-axis represent different ecosystem types. And here, after training the machine learning model at the site level, we do some perturbation. Say we increase the temperature by 1 degree for the input variables and see how different machine learning models will respond. And we can see that although these models, their accuracy is comparable, but their responses are different. So if we use this AI model for extrapolation, say scaling from size to regional and global scale, this uncertainty can propagate to larger region and globally, and finally cause substantial uncertainties in the regional and global product. So to solve this problem, we developed the causality-guided AI. This figure is complicated, but the core idea is that we first use the causality inference to infer the causal relationship between the target variable and its drivers. Then we use the inferred causal relationship to constrain the model dependency or model structure between the target variable and input drivers. And we call this bias as structure bias. And we integrate both the structure bias with the prediction bias into the loss function to train the AI models to make sure the model not only accurate much closer to the observation, but also try to make sure the model structure is more interpretable. Given the limited time, I will not introduce too much detail about this model, but if you are interested, you are welcome to scan the QR code for more details. Basically, the causality-guided AI integrate causal inference with the AI model to improve the model structure interpretability. And this figure shows why causality is important. This is the variable importance. And here, different columns represent different ecosystem types, and different rows represent different environmental variables. And deeper red color means this variable is more important. For example, here, it shows that the wind speed and air pressure are more important for the model. That's for the traditional black box AI models. However, when we compare the black box AI model with observation, the causal strength derived from causality inference, we can see there is a clear difference. From the observation, the causality part, it shows that it's a temperature, air temperature and soil temperature, and the gross primary production and the respiration are more important than the wind speed and the pressure. So there is a structure difference between the traditional model and the observations. After integrating the causal constraint, we can see in the middle as a causal ML. It shows that the temperature and GPP or gross primary productivity and respiration more important, more consistent with the observations, although they are not the same. But at least it reduces the structure uncertainty in the model itself. So using this causality-guided AI, we scale this site level of knowledge of processes to the regional and globally. Here, the left figure shows the regional scaled target variable. That's wetland methane emissions. And the x-axis represents the time. And the red line represents our model. And the blue line shows the top-down satellite inversions. Basically, use the satellite observed methane concentration to estimate wetland methane emissions. And the green lines represents the bottom biogeochemistry models. We can see that the top-down and the bottom disagree with each other. And using causality guided model is in the middle. It shows that there is an increasing trend in water and methane emission in the past 2 decades, and there are strong interannual variations. So using this causality guided AI model, it helps us to provide independent data sets constrained by the surface of the region to benchmark the satellite inversions and the bottom biogeochemistry models and help us understand some processes, biogeochemical processes regionally and globally. So causality guided AI is important for us to reduce the model structure uncertainty at the set level, and then reduce uncertainty at the regional scale, because we use the set level trained model to scale the process regionally and globally. So what's the main takeaway from this part? Here I give an example to show how to integrate AI together with the causality inference to reduce the model structure at the set level. If we do not reduce this structure uncertainty, the structure error can propagate from size to regional and global scale, and also across different temporal scales. And causality guided AI can help us reduce the model structure uncertainty and improve the physical interpretability and help us reduce the uncertainty for extrapolation problems. So I'll summarize. Let me summarize my talk. Today I share some my thoughts on the trustworthy AI for earth system science. As I mentioned, there are many metrics and dimensions to quantify the trustworthy AI. And today I mentioned the interpretability and the causality. Actually, there are many other aspects. For example, data itself, how to better understand the data, how the data is generated, processed, and how the data uncertainty can affect the model output and decisions. That's also very important. But yes, I will stop here. I would be happy to explore more on this topic with folks from the ESIP community. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead and enter your questions in. I'm going to see if I can't smallify this so that we can see. Here we go. All right. If you have questions, please go ahead and add them to the Slido. Thank you for that. That was great. As someone trained on process modeling, you're making me a little afraid. And so one of the questions that is rising in the list here is there a future where AI and machine learning models ingest and improve on specifically on the process-based models? So almost like you're using the machine learning as a supercharged optimization step to get the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very nice question. Actually, I discussed this issue with some of my collaborators work on earth system modeling. We know that earth system model is very big and there are many processes. And now we try to integrate the AI with the process model, create some hybrid AI models. But regarding the future, I think there is just my personal perspective. The future is there is no process model. Mm-hmm. It's hybrid AI. Mm-hmm. For some processes we know it very well, we of course can use exact processes and the AI model to replace these processes and make it differentiable. It's quite common. It's called differentiable AI, and basically neural network. And for some processes we are not sure about these processes. We can try our best to use some knowledge to constrain these processes and use AI to improve the accuracy in these parts. And also, of course, as I mentioned here, we can use some causality inference to discover knowledge from the data itself and to improve the process model. The process model, depends on how we implement it. Mm-hmm. It can either be Fortran or different language, but also can be a Python or PyTorch. The language itself is differentiable and can be optimized using AI. Yeah.
Thank you. We could talk about that for a long time. Okay, we have a question from Dave Jones asking, do these model projections take into consideration El Nino and the strength of current and future El Ninos? These events are of high impact, but lots of uncertainty remains on actual extreme event impacts. Can the model learn from the history of El Ninos and La Ninas and precipitation patterns in California?
That's a okay. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a super nice question. I like it. For our paper, we only check the normal conditions. We do not specifically check the extreme condition, like extreme weather, how El Nino affects the precipitation change. It's just integrate all different processes, like a normal, extreme, and below all these precipitation levels. So for the extreme events, it's remain challenging. I see there are some papers published try specifically investigate how El Nino affect the extreme weather and affect California precipitation, but yes, uncertainty is still there and very complicated. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question, how are you encoding the causality for the AI to use? How are you encoding the causality for the AI to use?
Yeah, nice. For encoding the causality into the AI, we first use the causality inference method to identify the causal relationship between the target variable and input drivers. Then we integrate this causal relationship, including the time lags and the causal strengths, into the AI model structure itself. For example, we use some attention mechanism also represent these dependencies, then use the causal strengths to compare these structure dependency differences and use the difference as a part of the loss function to constrain the AI model to reduce the structure uncertainty.
Excellent. Thank you. We have lots of questions. People are a curious bunch. Thank you, everybody, for these great questions. How do you validate the modeled methane emissions to evaluate these models, especially when scales of representation are so different?
That's a super cool question. We spend lots of time. That's also a tough question. We spend lots of time to validate these models for the methane because we know that the sites remain relatively sparse in some regions and also for some years. For example, the Eddy Grand Tower in our dataset, in current datasets, mostly measures the year before up to 2018. And there are a few set observations in the tropical areas. So the method we use to validate the model is called cross-validation. We leave some data set out, either across space. Say we train the model in this space and validate the model in another space. Or over time, we train the model in these years and the model never seen other years, then use other independent data sets to validate the model. But for some underrepresented years and regions, yes, the model remains highly uncertain because we do not have the data. So that's why we are still working on the data side, try to get more data sets in so that we can have better representative across ecosystems. Yeah,
that's great. And then here's a really fast-moving, popular question: have you seen cases where models reveal unexpected causality?
That's common. Yeah, that's a good question. I want to mention that here just an example show causality is powerful, but causality itself is still ongoing research area. Yeah, people will also use real knowledge to validate the causality, the method itself. So yes, for some applications, especially when the data is highly uncertain and sparse, the causality inferred from the itself, sometimes we also find it's hard to interpret compared to our domain knowledge. Yeah, that's common. That's both from the data and also the causal inference method itself. There are different causal inference methods suitable for different applications, so we have to understand their difference, their strengths and the limitations. Mm-hmm. And I have to say it's still hot topic and ongoing research area for the causality.
We have oodles of questions. I'll give you one more question and then we'll give you a rest, but we'll have the questions available for you to answer offline if you like after that. Yeah. Because we're really grilling you. I'm sorry, but we're curious. This is fascinating. Okay. Any thoughts on extreme event performance?
Oh, that's
great.
Good question. That's related to the extreme events for the El Nino. Yeah, recent paper published in I remember in probably I'm wrong in the Science Advance, and the conclusion is that process-based model perform better than AI models for extreme events. Yeah, I'm really interested in that paper. And for these extreme events, I would say it's very challenging for the AI models because the samples are very, very limited for extreme events compared to the normal events. So yeah, I would say that it's very challenging for AI model. I don't have the answer how to use the AI model to solve the extreme events totally. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We have additional questions. I'm sure people will be wanting to grab you and chat with you, send you an email, ask you more questions. This was fascinating. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your work with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Next, we have our Raskin Scholar, Maddie Berger, is going to come and speak with us about her research. Erin, could you hand me the award, please? Maddie, can you come on up? We want to recognize you. Maddie is not only one of our community fellows this year, but she is also our Raskin Scholar for this year. So I'll introduce Maddie. Maddie is an ESIP's Raskin Scholar and a community fellow. She's a PhD student at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She is being honored as a current graduate student in Earth or Computer Sciences who has an interest in community evolution of Earth science data systems. So Maddie will talk a little bit more about her research, but her research focuses on quantifying the spatial and temporal patterns of land use change at different scales in tropical coastal areas and examining how the patterns relate to marine water quality and nearshore ecological health. She uses geospatial analysis and machine learning methods to synthesize remotely sensed satellite data, field samples, public records, and other data sources with the aim of disentangling the drivers of localized impacts on coral reef ecosystems. So today, Maddie will be speaking on From Coral Cores to COGS, Bridging Marine Science and Scalable Geospatial Analysis. And we want to recognize Maddie also with a small token of your Raskin Scholarship Excellence in your Community Fellow Service this year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good morning. Again, my name is Maddie Berger, and I'm a PhD student at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, which sits at the University of Hawaii Manoa. And I'm so grateful to be presenting today as this year's Raskin Scholar. And I'm also a community fellow, like Sarah mentioned, and I support the Marine Data Cluster. And my goal today is to tell you a bit more about my research, and in doing so, illuminate how a random graduate student in marine biology ends up kind of being drawn into the ESIP sphere and spending a lot of time thinking about the things that all of us at ESIP work on. And again, first, I'd just like to thank the Raskin family for their generous support. And also, I'd like to thank ESIP for the opportunity to be a community fellow. It's been an amazing experience so far, and I'm really excited for what the rest of this year will bring. And before I get into my research, I just want to give a very quick background about who I am. I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area in the early 2000s, so peak Silicon Valley tech boom. And I went to college in UCLA, and after dabbling in communications and a bunch of other very non-quantitative fields, I ended up with a bachelor's degree in economics. I worked for a little bit in various sectors and then went back to school in 2020 to get a master's degree in conservation planning and data science from the Bren School at UCSB. And then again, worked for a little bit, did some things, and then moved to Hawaii to take a research position that turned into a PhD, kind of bridging marine geography and marine biology. And the point of this very limited timeline is that it took a really long, kind of strange pathway for me to commit to a career in STEM. Despite being from this hot spot of technological advancement and having been surrounded by that growing up, this was actually due to a crippling math anxiety that I had when I was a child. It was really, I was terrified of math. I thought it was the scariest thing. Tests would make me really nervous. And I'm not going to talk too much more about that now, but I just want to note that a huge breakthrough in helping me overcome that was finding community and connecting with people who thought about math and data science as a place for everyone. And that's something I really want to pay forward in my career now that I've finally kind of made it and found my footing in that realm. So after my master's work, or my master's at UCSB, I worked as a data analyst for NCs. And I was working on two projects simultaneously. One was a spatial analysis of nitrogen pollution to the Mesoamerican reef, and also estimating the most impacted marine ecosystems. And this is a figure from that paper that resulted from that analysis. And the other one was working as a spatial analyst for a open source tool called SeaSketch to support active marine spatial planning projects in mostly small island states and working on creating interactive planning tools for them. And in working on these two projects simultaneously, I noticed a gap, and which was we were learning more and more about the effect of land-based impacts to coral reef ecosystems and all these incredible science being generated on what was going on. But most places that were in active marine conservation and data or conservation planning projects didn't have any data products to consider those land-based impacts in their prioritization processes. And so this is what I ended up focusing my PhD on. So kind of this idea of how can we scale up the understanding that we're generating in the field and in the lab to integrate into planning processes in an efficient way. And so I'm really lucky to be part of this project. As part of my PhD, it's an NSF-funded project that uses the temporal records we can extract from paleo resources to better understand the relationship between land change and changes we see in coral reefs over time. This project spans two locations in the Caribbean, Bocas del Toro, Panama, and Belize. And today I'll be speaking about an analysis that focuses on our Belizean sites and just the coral cores. So this project uses both sediment reef matrix cores and coral cores, and today I'll just be talking about the coral cores. So why use coral cores? We can use isotope analysis of coral skeletons to reconstruct past reef conditions with various different chemical proxies. In this project, we are focusing on the delta 15N isotope to understand past water nutrient levels. And this image is not one of ours, it's from a different team, but you can see that each band on the coral skeleton is labeled with a year. It's kind of small, but those white blobs are years, just illustrating how this provides a really incredible time series data set that we can look back in time and then kind of use that to link to other things that were happening in the past. And so our first step was to collect our data. So across our Belizean sites, we collected 6 coral cores and 18 water samples. And the chemical analysis of those coral cores is ongoing. It's a very, very tedious, slow process. And that's being done by our colleagues at Max Planck Institute in Germany. But we already have a D15N record going back to 1970, which is really cool. And then, that says 1981. It was updated. We got new data from them with a new age model. And it's actually 1970, which is really awesome. And then we also have our water samples analyzed for a couple different chemical proxies indicating potential land impact, which kind of gives us an idea of baseline conditions when the coral core was collected. And so I wanted to use this time series that we've developed already to understand decadal relationships between changes on land and Belizean coral reef nitrogen exposure. And so to do that, I broke it down into 3 questions. First, I had to understand which patterns of different land uses or land covers are related to nitrogen land-sea connectivity. Second, we need to know what else influences how much land-based nitrogen reaches corals on the Belizean Barrier Reef. So what are the other important factors in the system? And then we can put those two together to understand how do changes in landscape patterns correlate to coral reef nitrogen exposure in Belize. And so when you start an analysis like this, you read out the questions, it seems pretty straightforward. It's going to be difficult, but hopefully in your proposal, you're pretty clear in kind of what you want to answer and what you want to get out of this analysis. And maybe it looks something like this. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And this is a vintage Candyland board I found online. I thought it was really pretty. But there's going to be twists and turns, and it's going to be challenging. There's going to be some interesting things along the way. But maybe you have a team, so you're doing this collaboratively, like those 2 kids holding hands and looking really happy and working together. Maybe you can build off an existing study and go across that rainbow bridge at the beginning and skip a bunch of the hard stuff. That'd be great. And then, you're exploring all these interesting things like the peppermint stick forest and the lollipop forest along the way and learning all these great things. So this is kind of what the expectation was. And of course, I was a new graduate student, so maybe a little bit naive. But the rest of this talk is going to talk a little bit actually what happened. So it was not collaborative and holding hands. I ended up unexpectedly being the only graduate student on this entire grant. So it was pretty much just me pushing everything forward. And that was definitely a little different from what I had grown up with at NCs, which is a very collaborative environment, many analysts working together on a project. So that was the first hurdle. The second was that the data that we kind of were hoping would exist and how we envisioned this analysis going did not exist. So there was no rainbow bridge shortcut. And that definitely had us rethinking what we're going to do and had to add some creativity to the process. Instead of there was the crooked old peanut butter house, we had the rickety old small laptop that was just not going to cut it for the analysis we hoped to run. And then lastly, instead of these lollipop woods to get lost in, we got a little bit lost in relying on tools that were not open source and some challenges that came around that. So now I'm going to talk about each of these in a bit more detail and what I learned from each of these experiences. Okay, so the first hurdle was that the data did not exist. So through literature review, I identified specific land uses that with quantitative links to coral reef outcomes. And this was obviously in order to do hypothesis-driven analysis, so we could really kind of test these relationships that have been found in the past. And the land uses that had kind of come out in the literature were things like banana plantations and small-scale agriculture and urbanization. But those classes and uses were not actually mapped at the spatial and temporal scale that we needed to analyze them alongside our coral core data. And that was a bummer, but it doesn't mean you can just give up on the question, right? You still want to be able to answer the question that you proposed in your very fancy NSF proposal. So does that mean suddenly I am a machine learning scientist? I like this meme because I feel like Harry's face is my face when my advisor's like, you're going to have to make your own data, you have to make your own maps. And that's what we're working on now. So we are making our own data. We're going to make a classification model to map these land uses that we hypothesize affect nitrogen land sea connectivity at the scales we need. And I think going back to that face, when I first started my data science journey, I think that recently, not that long ago, felt like something you really shouldn't do unless you were an expert in machine learning and you were studying that, and that was a major part of your PhD. But I think times have changed somewhat, and I'm really grateful for all the innovation that has made these methods more accessible and potentially applicable by data scientists like me who maybe don't have as deep a background in it. So we are building a classification model to match our time series, so kind of backcasting to 1984, which is when Landsat began to match with our coral core data. And a cool mini side project that's come out of this is designing an interactive script for, I do have some interns now, so I guess I'm not by myself anymore, but some interns that I've collaborated with to collect training data using high resolution planet imagery and Google Earth Engine, which has been a lot of fun to work with them on that. And I'll come back to that point in a little bit. And so while we work on that, that's one solution is, make your own data. I also found another pathway we could possibly take. So in reviewing the literature, I had found some interesting work relating compositional landscape metrics and configurational landscape metrics to water quality. And so compositional landscape metrics are looking at how much of a landscape is occupied by a certain land cover type, whereas configurational metrics look at what is the spatial arrangement of those land cover types. And so you can see in this example, both of these squares would have the same compositional metric of 12 black squares, but they have very different configurational metrics in terms of how those squares are arranged. And so I found in the literature that there's some fairly strong quantitative links between configurational metrics, so kind of the fragmentation of habitats, and stream water quality. And I thought maybe it'd be interesting to pair these kind of metrics with our time series data from the coral cores to test those same relationships with marine water quality. But how to calculate them? We fortunately do have existing data and from this incredible resource from Dr. Emil Charrington, who I believe I don't think he's here, but he is part of the EO cluster that recently formed. And he has produced and maintained yearly layers for all of Central America, so stretching from Mexico all the way down to Panama, of forested and non-forested pixels at 30 meters. And so we've used this data to calculate one compositional metric, which is percent forest, and 3 configurational landscape metrics identified in those stream studies for each of our watersheds that might be linked to our coral cores. So we have mean patch size, which is the average size of a forest patch per watershed, contagion, which is a metric kind of describing how mixed up your landscape is. So kind of the probability that 2 random pixels that are adjacent belong to the same land cover class. And then landscape shape index, which is a measure of how many edges there are in your landscape. So they're all kind of different ways of getting at forest fragmentation degradation. And so it wasn't not our original intention to kind of take this pathway and this analysis, but it turns out, again, there is some really strong quantitative evidence that is interesting to also test in the framework of our project. So that was really a cool outcome of this challenge. Okay, so we pivoted a bit from our original goal and determined some interesting land metrics and land variables that we compare with our coral core data. But at this point, I ran into my next hurdle, which is that my computer was just too small. And so again, what we're looking to do is calculate these metrics from the forest, non-forest binary data maps for every year. So we had 40 years in our time series for every watershed connected to our sample sites. And this ended up being quite extensive based on kind of that second question I mentioned into the 3 questions, like what are the other variables in the system that we should be considering. In this map on the left, I've just kind of drawn out the known currents in the region, and you can see that there's this very circular kind of gyre motion that surrounds our sites, which are in the yellow box. And because of that, we have to assume that what's happening in kind of many different watersheds across this landscape could affect what's going on in our sites. And so the watersheds that we wanted to analyze based on that extent are shown in green here. So stretching all the way down from the southern, kind of the end of the Yucatan Peninsula and the kind of the border of Mexico through Belize, including some in Guatemala and all of the coast of Honduras there. And this just wasn't going to cut it on my laptop. I mean, I can do it, but it's taking a long time and it's an iterative process. And so I needed to figure out something else. And the solution to that was getting to know my local supercomputer. So ours at Hawaii is called KOA. I was really excited to do this because I've been wanting to learn how to use this resource for a long time, but I have worked up until this point mostly in an R ecosystem, and it was very unintuitive. It was very confusing. There's a lot of words I had never heard before, like slurm and node. So it took me a while to get up to speed, but it was very informative and learning so much about how to think about hardware requirements and computing that I just had taken for granted for a long time, especially working at places like NCs that do such an amazing job supporting analysts with resources. But I never really thought about all the work that goes into actually building and maintaining and making sure those resources are working the way they should. I also learned a lot about geospatial software and how, the packages I was using in R were actually wrappers for other packages, which were built on other open source software. And so that was also really illuminating and overall just kind of helped me understand the back end of all these tools that I had relied on for so many years in a way that helped me feel a lot more confident in my analyses and confident as a data scientist. So that was kind of a cool outcome of this challenge. And we were able to get it to run on the supercomputer after a few weeks of trial and error and get that analysis done. Okay, so made it this far. We've got what we want to analyze and actually how to analyze it. This last challenge undercuts multiple steps in this data analysis journey and does continue to be a bit of a nuisance. So I mentioned earlier that we are relying on Google Earth Engine and Planet, but these are corporations and they have these great resources that, at least when I was learning remote sensing and a lot of kind of data analysis or image analysis back in the day, were the go-to for professors to kind of get students up to speed on. But they're constantly changing. And I don't know if anyone else gets these emails all the time, the action required. I hate to see it. It always means something different, whether reconfirming that you're a non-commercial project or making a Google Cloud project now, because that was something that changed in the time that I've used the tool, or even though I am non-commercial, suddenly putting my credit card information in because they need that. And so I realized that I had to be a little bit more intentional with my workflows. And so the solution has been to review and rearrange my data storage and workflows to make sure I avoid costly mistakes that were not written into our grant. We did not consider this when we put that proposal in, right? So this is money that would come out of someone's pocket. And in doing so, it kind of felt like I was playing a new game. Maybe this wasn't Candyland anymore and more something like Settlers of Catan, where we're moving things around and try to hide it from the other person and making sure it doesn't, get swept away by Google or whoever it is. But in doing all this, it has been a really cool opportunity to explore and engage in new developments in geospatial data storage and transfer that I'm very, very new to this world and actually learned about a lot of these tools at the first ESIP meeting I attended in January. But I'm really excited to engage more in that world as I do think it just is a critical solution for those of us who, again, learned a lot of this stuff in these tools that are not open source and are constantly changing. Like I get those emails at least once a quarter, like action required, not again. So really excited to continue learning about that. Okay, so for this last section of the talk, I'm going to zoom back out and just actually show a little bit of what we've found with all this analysis and all this work. So these results are very preliminary and are just the very first model we fit to the data. So tons more work to do here, but essentially we have put our landscape variables that I mentioned earlier as our predictor variables with our delta 15N analyzed from our core as our outcome variables. And then we use a pretty simple spatial weight to weight kind of the contribution of each watershed in each year by its distance to our sample site. And so for anyone that likes math, this is what it looks like in kind of hybrid math terms. We have first calculated this cumulative landscape impact in year T by summing all of our landscape metrics in each watershed in each year, weighted by its distance, and then that becomes the predictor variable for our delta 15N data in year T. And we're really interested, at least in this first analysis, in that slope parameter highlighted in blue. And I just want to note that we did also include a time lag just to account for the uncertainty in our age model, but also trying to understand, like when a landscape change happens, how that cascades down to the near shore likely takes some time. So that was what we started with for our first model. And so again, these are very preliminary results, but just before I show them, I want to orient you to the axes. On the bottom, we'll have the cumulative landscape impact metric in year T-1. And then on the y-axis, we have our D15N data. And I'll indicate which way indicates forest becoming more degraded. Our overall hypothesis being that as forest becomes more degraded, we expect to see higher nitrogen values. And for percent forest, we did indeed find a significant negative correlation. So as forest is becoming more degraded, our coral core D15N is increasing. Found the same for mean patch size and the same for contagion. So these were pretty strong results and we were excited about them. And then for landscape shape index, just noting the axes have flipped. So a higher landscape shape index is more degradation, more edges. And again, with more degradation, we are finding higher nitrogen values in the following year. So that was really interesting finding. And again, these are very, very preliminary. We have a lot more to dig in here, a lot more to do to interrogate that model and build on it and add in more data. And so I know I'm knowing over time, so I'm just going to breeze through the end here. Where does that leave us on this board? We're not quite home at the end of our journey, but we're getting there. And while I'm by no means an expert in any of those hurdles or solutions that I described, facing them has exposed me to so many cool new tools and approaches and things that I had not learned about before. And I'm excited about now. It's an area that I want to focus my work, which has been really cool and a big reason why I'm here as a fellow at ESIP. And I also just want to say, I would never have been able to undertake this journey without all the amazing people who put time and effort into maintaining open software and data, writing blogs, posting on Stack Overflow, opening contributing issues, and provided me with advice and encouragement. That has truly been a lifeline in so many ways and a work that so many of you contribute to. And that hopefully can just show how, even if you feel like you're speaking into the ether, there's probably some grad student out there that is reading all of this and, muddling through some analysis and it's helping them a lot. And that grad student was me and still is me. And with that, sorry, I'm very over time. I just want to thank everyone and acknowledge my co-authors for all their support on this as well. And happy to take any questions about the project or about any of the data analysis as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maddie. That was great. I really liked your Candyland journey. That was really great. And I also love seeing that you worked on C-Sketch. So I ran into the C-Sketch program years ago. We have a question here for you from Dave Jones. He said, Madeline, great presentation. Have you thought about packaging your journey for other students to see? Perhaps getting this presentation recording out to as many as possible would be really helpful to those considering to pursue advanced degrees. Congratulations to you and bravo.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really kind. I would love to get this out to other students, especially if those of you who work with students think it would be helpful. Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, like, again, a lot of these things I didn't expect to encounter, maybe, again, naively, but I think if you have a community to help support you through it, it's not scary. But if you don't, it's very scary and could, cause all people to be like, I'm not doing this. That's not what I want to do. So anyway, I think that would be great and would be super interested in working with anyone to help do that. So yeah.
Conveniently, this has been recorded. And conveniently, every single person in this room is in a great position to help share it with students and folks who are considering. So when we get our recordings cleaned up and posted, I encourage all of you to help us share this. But ESIP will do its utmost to share your story through our channels.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a start. First step, right? But then, we need others to share it on and say, hey, I saw this thing. So please help everyone. That's a great thing. Okay, next question. Your project has developed really cool data sets, software, and physical samples. How are you sharing these so that other researchers can benefit from the hard work you've done to overcome the challenges?
That's a great question. I've actually been thinking, I didn't touch on this at all because I'm not really the one handling the physical samples, but those physical samples are something I've been thinking about a lot. Coral cores are very costly to collect, and obviously we don't want to collect too many because you're coring a coral, and that is sad. And so I'd be really interested to talk to people here who are knowledgeable in that and pass that along to our colleagues at Max Planck and I guess she's at ASU, who are doing more of the handling of the coral cores themselves. In terms of my work, because I kind of grew up as a data scientist at NCs, I try to put everything on GitHub. I try to treat everything open source. With this project, that is a little bit up to the PIs on it. So I do have to have that conversation still, but it is something that once we have everything a bit more packaged and kind of ready to go, I would love to be really intentional with that. So again, using this meeting and the connections I make here to learn how to best do that. So if anyone has any ideas, come talk to me.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure people will have ideas. Next question is, what would you recommend ESIP do to better support students and early career researchers?
I would just think, being visible and letting know I'm not sure the best channels, but that it exists as a program. I found ESIP kind of by chance, I think, on LinkedIn, which was great. I was trying to learn more about new geospatial emerging technologies, and I noticed ESIP sharing all this great stuff, and so that's how I was exposed to it. But as a student, I don't think I saw it come through any of our main communication channels, which I think for at least in my institute is like the weekly announcements. Most people read that, and so finding a way to engage. I know it's a lot of work to reach out to each communication director and stuff, but
there's space. We can
students are so busy. So there's usually like one or two touch points I think that a lot of students always look at. And if you can figure out what those are across institutions, that can be a really effective way to get in touch. So
great. That's awesome. Thank you. I think we can definitely work on several of those things without too much trouble. The next comment says, question actually, I was really interested in your comment about overcoming your math phobia through finding a community. Many people have similar fears. What were the key elements of how the community helped you learn to love, or at least come to terms with, using math?
Yeah, so the community that was really important for me did not come until my master's degree. So it wasn't until my mid-20s that I found people, and again, it really started with an attitude. Like, data science and math is for everyone. Hard stop. That did not exist for me in my elementary school, high school experience. That was not the vibe being put out at all. It was either you're really, really good at it and that's where you should be, or you should just forget about it and don't even try. That was much more kind of what I grew up with. So I was really lucky to have, I think a lot of people might know her in this room, Allison Horst. She was my first R instructor, and she was just incredible. And her style of teaching was a revelation to me. And we also had at UCSB a really active Our Ladies chapter, and that was a really fun way to just have like a more casual touch point with R. We could get together and talk about code and learn new things in a really low stakes environment. And then also NCs has just been, again, like such a trailblazer in collaborative work. So I was really, really lucky to have landed at UCSB. And before I started that master's program, I didn't expect to go into data science or conservation planning. I really fell in love with it there. So I use that as my model. And it's actually something that I'm hoping to grow more at UH. I think I've talked to a few people about that, and in the Pacific in general. So definitely hoping to build that up in other places as well, because it was very effective for me.
Thank you. Another comment, love the presentation and framing. And then there's two questions about nitrogen. So I'll ask them at the same time. Do you have any, so first, do you or did you have any in situ measurements of nitrogen on the reefs, even for a short time?
Yeah, well, we have those water samples are not great because again, it's just a point in time sample. And that's a great question because we know there's a lot of other things that are happening to determine levels in the skeleton, right? At so many different scales. So there's the open ocean signal, which is what my colleague at Max Planck, that's what he specializes in. He's working on that. There's the kind of biological happening of the coral itself, which it can switch between being heterotrophic or using its symbionts a lot more, and that can affect the amount that's being coded into the skeleton. So there's a lot there, and I'm not an expert in various parts of that. And so a next step is really digging more into that correlation. So right now, I was just looking at that long-term correlation. We would love to make a more complex model that maybe looks at some of those other drivers. It's just challenging because, to that question's point, we're working at such different scales. So when we have the in situ data versus landscape-wide variables, and that's been a big challenge of this project, but what also makes it a lot of fun. So
absolutely. And whatever nitrogen signals in the reef is totally an integrated signal versus your point about this.
I don't know if I answered the question, but all we really have for the in situ is those water samples we took in 2024. So that's kind of our baseline.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It helps you kind of locate in the scale. And then the other nitrogen question is, any plans to look into agricultural production of fertilizer inputs over the years, resulting in the increase in nitrogen instead of deforestation alone?
Yes, that's kind of our goal with that next map that we're still working on developing and classifying. So one thing that I would really love to do, but it's really hard. And so if any remote sensors out there or crop mappers out there, come talk to me. I would love to differentiate between, maybe not at the crop level, because that is really hard, but at least at the production scale level. So like, industrial and plantation style agriculture versus small scale agriculture, and seeing if we can identify shifts in that over time, as that determines both the inputs and then also the scale. And one thing that's really interesting to me about mapping different land classes is that, there's land classes that you want to map. There's lots of different reasons to map different land classes, but one thing that would be really cool is if we can map classes that are actually applicable to policy. So a lot of work in kind of this realm has been showing things like, okay, agriculture is bad for coral, but that's not really a realistic policy to say like no more agriculture in this watershed, right? Like that you can't stop producing food. So it'd be really interesting if we can actually think about what kind of agricultural shifts are bad for coral and then make that a little bit more applicable to actual land management policy. So that's my goal with that map. It's a very lofty goal, especially as someone who doesn't have a background in crop mapping. But if we could do it for our region, that would be really cool, and just get at that a little bit more. It would be really nice.
That's great. I'm gonna ask you to give us one last word of wisdom about advice to students and early career professionals on how to persist and stay motivated despite challenges.
This one is so cliche, but just believe in yourself. I think it took me a really long time to get to a point where I could even come to a meeting like this and feel confident about interacting with people. And I'm in my 30s. So I think if I had been able to believe in myself a bit more in my early 20s, then that would have been a huge help. And when I say believe in myself, it's not just like I can do it. It's like when someone makes you feel like you can't, don't necessarily listen to them and think really deeply about why and trusting yourself that, if it's something you're interested in too, then you'll probably make it work. And I guess that'd be the other part, is that if you're interested and passionate about it, even if you're not the best at it right away, that's okay. That's what I would tell students. That's what I struggled with.
It's a process.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And I think that's so relatable. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Let's give Maddie another round of applause. This afternoon, we have the Unconference coming up. So Unconference, we are having Unconference this afternoon. What is it, you may be asking? It's for late breaking and unconventional session ideas, things that have occurred to you since the call for sessions came and went, something that you've had a discussion with someone about here this week, said we need to get a bunch of people together and work on this idea. You can go ahead and provide your pitches for, here's my idea for Unconference. And those will be this afternoon at 2 p.m. But we need you to start providing your ideas now, and it's still doing it. All right, we will make sure that QR gets posted. What we need you to do is submit your title and description by 12:30 this afternoon on Slido with a link that we will be providing. The staff will quickly shuffle through the ideas and identify the top 5 ideas. Those will get hybrid support If there are other ideas, never fear, you can still meet. We just don't have a way to give you hybrid access. And then at 2, we will convene here. There will be a brief pitch session where everyone can, have a word, say just a brief sentence or two about their idea, and then we will assign where everyone goes. That's fine. Thank you for making that work. There's your QR code. If you have unconference ideas, I love to see people snapping at them. If you don't actually grab it this time, we can also push it out on the Slack. And then people can self-aggregate into which unconference sessions they go to, and then magic happens. Okay, this evening at 6 p.m., we have Funding Friday poster making. This is also a self-aggregating, self-driven process. In Gabriel's Cafe, which is in the hotel building, so like 2, 1.5 buildings over, the building where we're sleeping. There's a place called Gabriel's Cafe. And that is where we will have the markers and the poster paper and the kind of setup for you all to work together on creating your ideas to pitch. And then on Friday morning, 8 a.m., we will have pitches. Each group will have 2 minutes to pitch. I believe there was a musical group last year. So you can pitch in all kinds of ways that are meaningful to you. And then we'll have a voting system, and then ESIP staff will use votes plus our goals of distributing the funds across topics, age groups, institutional affiliations to award those seed funding monies. And then after that, at 11, we have the closing plenary. Everyone is invited. Partner organizations will be asked to sign in. Everyone else is completely welcome. We are going to be talking a little bit about sort of how ESIP is doing. We will welcome in the new board members, and we will do an exercise where we hear from you about what actions ESIP needs to be taking. ESIP is 28 this year. So as we get ready for our 4th decade, we need to be thinking creatively about all the things that we want to do together, all the things we want to be. And so we need your input on what actions ESIP should be taking and supporting and facilitating to make that next, several decades be a reality. Oh, Friday. It's Friday. And then finally, I want to remind you to answer the federal question of the day. That's also pushed out on Slack. It is basically some questions that our federal partners have identified as things they really want community input on. And it's, free answer, short answer. You can provide as brief or as lengthy thoughts as you like. And they are so grateful for all of your input. So with that, I think it is time for us to go to break. And ESIP staff are scattered around if you have questions about what's coming or how something works. Thanks, everybody.